here we go. Episode 6, right? Episode 6, here we go. And 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Rehearsal Time with Group 2. Our guest today is an actress who spent 35 years in the New York theater, TV, and commercial scene. You may recognize her from her work as part of the Circle Repertory Company in New York, as well as various on-screen productions such as American Playhouse, as well as Law and Order. We're extremely excited to have her join us, so please give a warm Group 2 welcome to Joyce Reehling.
Woo!
Thanks for coming on, Joyce.
Look at her go.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
So I know we just talked for the past, how long? An hour? But Joyce, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? I know it's weird times.
No.
How are you?
Both Tony and I are doing well.
Good.
Fortunately, I love my husband, and we get along really well. And we say this every day. Aren't we lucky that we're a couple that get along really well? Because I cannot imagine the hell of being in shutdown with somebody that,
I can't either, yeah.
Wants to follow you from room to room going, what are you doing, honey? What are you doing, honey? Let's both go to the grocery store. No.
What have you been doing?
My husband's the one who goes to the grocery store for two reasons. He's the great cook in our family.
He really is. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he is. He is a good cook, and I have an underlying condition of asthma, so I don't go out if I can avoid it at all. Except I do go swimming every day, so that's my.
What's
exercise.
he been making? What's he been making around the house? Any dish that stands out to you?
Well, my favorite thing that he does is the meal I met him over, or we started dating with. I had met him before, but we started dating with his coq au vin. So that's my fave.
Did he make that? Or did you go out and have that dish?
No. He made it. Actually, we were having leftovers, and I knew if the guy had leftovers of a great coq au vin and wild rice with a pouille montrachet, this was the guy to follow. So
You're right.
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah.
Oh, let me get
You've
something
done
out of the
great.
freezer. I'll just get a really good coq au vin.
Yeah.
And, that I have
Wow,
the way one does.
Did you both meet in New York?
Yeah.
Oh, what was he doing while
He
you
was
guys
in
were there?
corporate. He was, let's see, when I first met him, he was working for Seagram's. He was always in pension and benefit, H&R kind of stuff. He worked in the international realm, so that as the years went by, he went up. He left there, went to Warner Lambert, and then he went to United Technologies for 5 minutes. That was back in the late 80s when there was a huge recession. People always get all upset about recessions and go, oh my God, it's never been like this. But we have them every 7 to 10 years. And he was caught in that recession. And we had just moved to Connecticut for this job. He had been wooed away from Warner Lambert after he was there 10 years. And United Technologies wanted him. And within 6 months, the recession deepened and last hired, first fired. So he was out of work for, 18 months or more. And this is a guy who'd never been out of work in his life. He left graduate school. He went to Johns Hopkins SICE program in international studies and stuff. And then he started working, and it wasn't until the 80s till he was downsized, which was very difficult for him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Fortunately, as an actor, I was used to being without work. I worked a lot, but you'd have gaps,
Right.
And I wasn't as frightened by it as he was because he had never been out of work. And then he got a job at Duracell. Then I can remember driving home from the train station one night because I went into the city every day for auditions. And I'm driving home one night and I hear on the radio, and there was a hostile takeover of Duracell today. And I just went, what that meant. And I pulled over on the road we lived on, and I just went, oh my God, what is it? We're going to get fired again. Downsized. Downsized is French for fired. And and so he didn't. I mean, it was not a great happy time. It was bought by Gillette. I know they own Gillette. Who was it? It's the corporate company. They're at the anyway.
One of those corporate companies, right?
Big umbrella company.
Yeah.
And they own Gillette, and they bought Duracell, and they were very 50s gray desks kind of, whereas Duracell was predominantly young, a lot of women in good positions, really good positions.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit well with them. But
Oh.
so we lasted there a couple more years, and then what did you do after that? Anyway, he always says when people say when did you retire? He goes, well, I was involuntarily, prematurely retired by the corporate world.
Involuntarily, prematurely retired.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say.
And also when these recessions, it used to be corporations, multinationals had these big divisions that handled. What he used to do is handle. I take Tyler and say, well, you're gonna move from Pennsylvania to France for 3 years. Well, how you pay somebody, what their health benefits are, their housing costs, putting their kids in school, all that's part of the package. I thought when I met him, they say, well, you go to France, you just go. But there's all this stuff and international law that comes in. Well,
Oh, wow.
Right.
as it started to tighten the market, they started letting go of international people and wanting generalists. So he was he was sort of in the realm of buggy whips at that point.
Wow.
It's if you go to cars and nobody wants a buggy whip maker anymore. So he was out, 10 years earlier than he should have been. Because and also, when you're in your 50s, people are looking at you and going, oh, well, I'm going to only have you for 10 years, so you're not really worth it.
Right.
So-
Oh, right. Yeah.
Whereas with actors, of course, for women, this happens in our 30s.
Right.
I'm astounded that I got as far as 58 in New York still working. Not like I used to. Not like I did in my 20s, 30s, and even my 40s. But I was still working, although I had moved more to voice work, radio spots, voiceovers, things like that. But, actresses in general, I'm lucky I'm a character girl, but even in my younger and thinner days, you could see the window going like this because they really pick up any play and count how many women are in it.
That was something we were talking about. We wanted to ask you about maybe because a lot of people they'll talk about their career, maybe their late career, or but we were wondering when you were getting started, or maybe when you're approaching that hump of where okay, I'm gonna have to push through, and because I want to do this for another 20, 30 years. So what was that like for you? That period, the beginning, kind of middle stage of your career, where you had to really keep doing audition and grind,
Really grind
for all this work.
The beginning is aspirational. I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts, and this was back when it had just gotten started, so it was not nearly the training program that it is now, which is highly professional, and, we were all kind of puppies in a box when we first started.
Right.
Because I was literally there the second or third year, maybe, that the school even existed. So my graduating class was the first group of people that had gone through 4 years of schooling there.
Fighting pickles at that point, or
What, darling?
were you the fighting pickles at that point already?
We weren't even the pickles at that point, I don't think. I can't remember when the pickles started.
They weren't even fighting. They were.
They were pickle juice at that point. They were still in the ground.
Yeah.
They were cucumbers.
Cucumbers.
We were just cucumbers then. But it was all aspirational. And we had no alumni association or anything. You didn't feel like, oh, I'll go there and I know I can connect with other people from the school like you would with Juilliard or Yale or something that had been around Catholic University.
Right.
We had nothing. Nobody, nothing.
Wow.
So it was all aspirational. And, I finally started working. The job I had to get me through the first couple of years was I worked at an answering machine, it was called
Like a
Radio
call
Registry,
center?
but it was, I did a plug switchboard.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was an
Wow.
awful job.
Can't imagine.
Fortunately, I worked with these wonderful, most of the women were from Barbados, and they were wonderful. I'm trying to think of the woman who sat directly next to me. She was just heavenly. It all came to me. I know her name as well as I know my own. I'm just blanking out on it. But I had like a 48 plug switchboard with 3 call-in plugs. So if you were out on the road, out on the street, and you wanted to call and see if you had, you'd be one of these down here that would light up, and I'd plug in and say, Radio Registry, and they'd say, oh, hi, it's Joyce. What do you got for me? And of course, we never said you don't have anything. We'd always go, well, nothing for you now. Not yet.
Wow.
Not yet today.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Trying
Keep
to be
tuning
good. But
in.
I did have a client who, I think she was going through a divorce or something, and when you plugged in, some of them had stars next to them. They wanted you to pick up on the first ring.
Wow.
How she thought I would know her phone was going to ring is beyond me. But you'd plug in as quickly as you could, and you'd hear her phone pick up, and then you'd go, 82456, whatever it was, because we didn't use her name.
Right.
And they'd say, well, this is Gladys. Could you? And you'd hear, I'll take it. So,
This is
if you
Gladys.
got
It's
down
mine.
the second ring, after the phone call, she'd call and say, I'm supposed to be picked up on the first ring.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
Oh, and she
Wow.
was a jewel.
Wow.
She was.
There
We
was
all
some high
loved her.
demand. Yes.
We all sit around going, no wonder he left. I just hope something awful wasn't happening in her life, but she was very mean to us. And I had a wonderful guy, Monsieur Fournier. I don't know, he was in the rag trade in some way. And so I'd get all these calls from Paris. And so, but this was back when a trunk line would come through. So Monsieur Fournier, and you'd hear, Allô? Hello, this is Paris calling. Hello. I go, hello, Paris. This is New York. Hello. I am calling for Monsieur Fournier. I have someone on the line for him. And I go, Monsieur Fournier is away. Can I take I take down the information. I say, oh, Paris. She, yes. I'd say, what's the weather like in Paris? They, oh, it's a little sunny, a little hot.
Wow.
And in New York, it's terrible over here. It's so humid and it's raining. And okay, bye-bye. And so I
Okay, bye-bye.
Wow, that was a really good accent.
So that's I talk through the Paris operator, and that was the height of my excitement was because I'd never been to Paris, of course, but the height of my excitement was getting a call from Allô, this is Paris.
Joyce, it seems like you made the absolute best out of a situation that you're just so unsure of, because as performing artists, you always, you need to be okay with that call job. You need to be okay with that Starbucks job in order to really break out. When was that moment for you that you really started to break into the scene, the acting scene in New York?
I went to audition I had seen Hot L Baltimore, which was a play by Lanford Wilson that was running downtown at Bleecker Street. And I had seen it, and I thought, this play is just freaking brilliant. And I so wanted to audition down there, and I just couldn't get an audition. I didn't have an agent at the time either. So the Seattle ACT, an Actors Contemporary Theater, was holding auditions. And, this is a lesson in never burning your bridges. The gal who is the front desk gal at TCG, Theater Communications Group, which worked as kind of a casting gate for regional theaters and stuff. And, you'd try to go and whether you had an agent or didn't have an agent, you could sometimes get. And I was always amazed at how many people, young actors, people who I knew probably didn't have a lot more going for them than I did as far as our resume. And they'd come in and they'd be going, mama, like throwing stars around it.
So me usually.
behaving very actorly,
Right.
And
Sure,
meanwhile, they were not talking to, the gal's name was Mary Buck. They were not talking to Mary at all. And I'm sitting there, I'm basically scared to death all the time, because I didn't come from,
Right.
I came from Podunk, Maryland. I went to school in North Carolina. I had training, it's scary when you first start getting to New York and you're walking down the street. There are more people walking down the street like this than exist in your entire state, and that's just Fifth Avenue.
Right.
So I would sit and talk to Mary, and every now and then they'd say, well, we're going to break for 20 minutes or something, and I'd say, well, I could afford a cup of coffee, so I'd say, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, and then I would say, Mary, do you want anything? Oh, thanks, yeah, could I have a cup of whatever? So there are two things about Mary. She had some input. She's the front desk girl. She had some input. Exactly. And she advocated for me to get a reading for Hot L Baltimore.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Which I got, and I went to Seattle, and that was the beginning. That was my first equity job, doing a show I very much wanted to do. And then flash forward about a year later, so the hotel downtown called me and said, could you come in and take over for the gal who plays your role? She's going to take, I don't know, 2-3 weeks vacation that she'd accrued or something.
Right.
And so I had to go in and read for the director, Marshall Mason, and the playwright, Lanford. And they hired me and said, this is great, yeah. And as I was performing, they were saying, God, you're so much better than what we have, and would you take over for her?
Yes, that's right. Crush it, Joyce. Don't just
And
crush it.
I said, no. I said, if I do this, everyone in this company is going to hate me. Now, here's the interesting part.
Right.
I was young enough and naive enough to not consider the knock-on effect. And I had enough of a grounding to know that I didn't want to start in the theater by being hated by everyone in the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
That's something
and
I
I
wouldn't
just
have
thought it
even
was
thought of.
morally
Yeah,
wrong
I-
to send someone off for a vacation and recast while they're,
Right.
Yeah.
So a couple of months or not even a year later, they called me again and they said, would you please? And I said, listen, we've gone through this. Meanwhile, believe me, I'm not racking up lots of work. I would have gladly taken it. I don't know. I was just, my better angels were in high gear. And they said, we know what. Now, we weren't being paid Cornish to do this down there. I don't know what we were paid a week. Of course, I'd have to adjust it for inflation to even begin to tell you, because if it was $125 a week, that what was more than 125 would be now, but
Right,
not by
absolutely.
much.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come in if you give her a month's notice. Let her get her life together. Let her know that she has to save and be willing, able to step out. Otherwise, we're back to the same place, and that didn't make sense to me. So anyway, I did go in, and I was with the show, I don't know, 6 months, something like that.
So was that like a full tour that the show was doing? The 6 month?
I'm sorry?
Was the 6 months that you were with the show a full tour cycle, something like that?
No,
or-
it's just how long it was running downtown. It was still running.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to think whether we closed that out or whether I got another job. I may have gotten another job and left. And then I came back to do a reunion thing that they did where almost everyone had ever played these roles came in and we switched off, and it was a fundraiser. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning it is that Mary got me that job. She went on to be a sub-agent with an agency that I then signed with. She then went on to be a casting agent. But she went out to Los Angeles, and I didn't do a whole lot out there. But my first job really can be traced to being decent to someone
That's amazing.
everybody else discounted.
Hey,
And that was my first
take
equity
note.
job.
Yeah.
My first equity job. And that introduced me to Lanford Wilson and Marshall Mason, who, while I was performing, I wasn't in the second act. And Marshall and Lanford would drop by. The show had been running a while, so to keep it fresh, we didn't have a terrific stage manager, but we had who we had. And so Marshall and Lanford would come by and give notes every now and then. And they then said, listen, we're thinking of we've started a company, and we'd like to offer you a chance to come in. Would you do that? And
Yes.
Are you kidding? And I mean, we were paid next to nothing again, but it was the beginning of the Circle Repertory Company, and that company existed for 25 years, something like that.
Amazing.
And I did a lot of the work I did was done there, and it was all with, mostly 90% was done with living American playwrights. So, it was a great group of people to be with, and that's, Jeff Daniels and Bill Hurt and myself, Nancy Snyder, Jonathan Hogan, who's an unsung, brilliant actor. I'm trying to think who all else was in it.
And Christopher Reeve, right?
Christopher did, yes.
Yeah,
He and I never worked together there.
Okay.
We worked together when we did. We started 5th of July with Bill Hurt, And then Christopher came in to do the Broadway run. And even though he had done shows at Circle, I just wasn't there. Because all of us, there were 2 years where we stayed as a company. We were paid as a company. We worked with the playwrights. You know, we were there 24/7. And then we didn't have the funding to continue. But we kept, I mean, if you were cast, you'd be there. But it wasn't the same as having a company where we did classes in the morning and rehearse in the afternoon and perform at night. So you'd go off and do other things and come back to do a show there. And that's what a lot of us did. And so thank God for commercials, because I couldn't have afforded to stay in theater if I didn't make some money.
Right. And did that relocate you back into New York City to do the commercial work? Or were you still in Seattle then?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Seattle was like a 3-week or 4-week gig.
Yeah.
That's the job that introduced me to them. And then I took over in the city. And but no, I lived for almost 20 years in the city, and then Tony and I moved out to Connecticut, and I still was coming in, and I was doing shows at Playwrights Horizons or Off Broadway or Broadway or what have you.
Wow, that's amazing. Because you just recently were doing a show in 2019. Back in North Carolina.
Yes, I did a couple of shows with a company here called the Judson Theater Company, and it's Morgan Sills, who was born and raised in Southern Pines, and he's now a producer in New York, and had been an entertainer himself. He had been more of a song and dance guy, I think. But he really wanted to have an equity theater here. Yeah. So, I mean, I think his long-range plan is to have like a, kind of a resident company, but that's easily 10 to 20 years away. So what he started doing was bringing in a 2-person show or a limited show, and you start with bringing names in, and I worked with, I'm looking over here because our poster's over here, Sally Struthers and Kim Coles and I, and 2 young actresses from New York who were just simply great. We did Love, Loss, and What I Wore, the Nora Ephron piece, which I loved. Partly because you work on it, of course, and you more or less, you over time you can memorize something, but you didn't have to memorize. The first time I performed with, not this show, but they were doing Steel Magnolias, and I think I had met Morgan once, maybe. And I got a call one day, and he said, "Oh, hi, it's Morgan." I said, "Hi, how you doing?" Because I knew they were doing Steel Magnolias with Dawn Wells, who was on Gilligan's Island. I never watched.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. What did he play?
She played Mary Ann.
She was Mary Ann.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I watched Gilligan's Island. The first season's in black and white, and then I got the DVD set 2 and 3 were in color. That's a funny show.
Well, she was going to do Weezer, and they were. So he called and he said, "Well, I'm at the hospital." I said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And he said, "No, Miss Wells is not well, and I'm in the emergency room." And I said, "Oh my goodness gracious!" So he said, "I don't think she's going to be able to open the show. Would you step in, with the book, And I said, no.
How much time did you have when
that was going to be the day after tomorrow. So, it was like a Wednesday. We were opening Thursday. It was like, you could rehearse today, some tomorrow, and then that night you're on. And I said, look, send me the script. It's been a long time since I read that script. Because I'd originally read for it off Broadway to replace, I think, Margot Martindale. She was Truvy. And Margot and I have known each other for many, many years, and she's gone on to have a fantastic career, and well-deserved. She's just brilliant. But she and I would, be like this, you play this role, I'll take it over. Oh, I play this role. Or we'd call each other and say, they're casting such and such. I'm not going to do it. Get over there. So he sent me the script, and I read it, and I went, you know what? Here's the thing about actors. You join the tribe. If you start to work, you join the tribe. And if someone falls in the tribe, you pick them up. It's like being in the Marine Corps. You go back, you pick them up, and you drag them with you. And I thought, I can't say to this man, I'm not going to help you. I can have a book in my hand. So I went, he sent me the script. I called him back. I said, of course I'll help you. So they had an announcement every night, and you could hear some of the people who were devoted. I didn't know people were devoted to Gilligan's Island. I had
buzzing.
no idea. I mean, so you'd hear, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, no. And I went, geez, whoever thought that this woman was such a draw? But I went on, and it was seat of your pants acting. We did rehearse. And the girls came in on a day that they didn't have to rehearse. And we did just my scenes. And when I tell you do just my scenes, it's for blocking. It's not for a character, so your mind is whirling as fast as you can.
I can't imagine.
And,
Yeah, that'd be insane.
and so I had the book in my hand. And now it was only Thursday through Sunday. They don't do long runs yet because they can't afford it. So, but what an introduction to the community. I mean, all of a sudden, people then look at you like you're a flying Walenda. Oh my God, she got on the tightrope, and look, she didn't fall, And of course, by Sunday, the irony was, by Sunday, I was off book. I mean, by then, I knew the play,
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember doing
Yeah.
the opening night, and then I said, so is she better? I mean, like, I don't have to do this again? And they went, well... No,
We actually need you for the next.
because
2
when you
years.
come off after doing something like that, all you want is a stiff drink and to never be talked to again. So I ended up doing it, and I ended up, memorizing the play.
Wow.
But I do love shows like Love, Loss, and What I Wore, which you end up memorizing. It's a lot of monologues and a lot of cross monologues and talk with
Yes.
each other. But you do work to memorize as much as you can. But I do love a reader's theater kind of thing because it doesn't I cannot memorize at the rate I did in my 20s. And for one thing, I used to go from show to show to show to show practically.
Right.
Right.
And you'd have a longer period of rehearsal than we get down here
Right.
because of time constraint. Although he said to me, after that, he was talking about he had raised some money, and they do an outreach to the schools when it's appropriate. They did To Kill a Mockingbird, so they got scripts for all the kids, or the original book for all the kids, and then they had them come and they'd have a discussion and stuff. He's trying to make
that's
it
great.
relevant to the community. And he said, if you could would you prefer better sets, better costumes? He listed a couple of things. I said, more rehearsal days. I don't care if I have to go out in a leotard. Well, I would. But but I said, 2 rehearsal days more will take your show that's doing just fine to this. And I said, your goal is not to look flashier or to do an extra play. Your goal is to do the very best play you can, in the best way that you can. And every rehearsal day buys you quality. That's what it does.
Wow.
So that's
great
what they
advice
did. They
anyway.
were
That
able
is-
to add
that
2 or
applies
3
to
extra
everything.
rehearsal
Wow, that
days,
applies to so
and it makes all the difference. So
Yeah.
It's about quality, right, Joyce?
Yeah.
Not
it is
quantity.
about at the end of the day, you'd rather do 2 shows extremely well than 4 shows,
Right.
because you
Right.
don't have the time. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. So Joyce, while you were in New York City, when you were looking, when
can
you
you
were
lean
finding all
into
this
your
work-
mic, honey? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Testing,
that's a little
testing.
better.
When
Yeah.
okay, when you were in New York, right? Were there any moments where you were like, oh man, this is kind of scary? Maybe I haven't seen a paycheck for a little bit before things started really coming in your way.
Oh my God, that was like all the time.
And I ask
you
because we
do
have,
a show and it runs at Circle Rep. We did shows for I think it was 5 weeks or something. It was a subscription house, so we knew unless the show was picked up to go to Broadway, which didn't happen all the time. Then you knew that you had X number of weeks to rehearse and perform. So then if you didn't have anything coming up, and if you weren't doing a lot of commercial work at the time, I wish I had $1 million for every time I stood in my kitchen going, I can't pay the rent. I can't pay the rent.
Oh, wow.
And fortunately, because of commercials, some little thing would drop in my mailbox, even $100. I mean, this was back when my apartment on 2nd Avenue, I think, was $250 a month. It might as well have been 7,000 because it was $250 a month, but I was making $125 a week before taxes, so.
Right.
Right. It's
And
tight.
something would drop in my mailbox, $100, $200, $500, depending on and you'd go saved again, and so you just did that, unless you were running in a show that ran and you were making good money, and then the smart thing to do is save it, maybe
Because
get a new pair of shoes and
Right. Yeah, we have people listening to the podcast that are, more or less in those shoes. We have musicians who are kind of like, oh man, we're kind of on our own now, out of the degree. And you're just kind of like, how do we do this? What would be some advice that you would give performing artists, the younger crowd, that you would give our age, to just, know that everything's going to be okay? Because it seems like you just kind of like, it was okay. It was going to be okay. And you just you were in your kitchen, and I know you had those moments of fear, but everything else ended up okay. It all ended all right at the end of the day.
But part of it is you have to be prepared with your craft. You can't be aspirational with no talent or no training. You can even be aspirational with talent and still not make it. Talent and training, I think, is harder to beat. You have to work at anything that is thrown at you. And if there is... Are you hearing that sound? I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, don't
So, fix it in post, I know.
Zing.
Yes.
But you have to take the jobs that you can take. And for me, I'm very pro-union because my unions made my life much more bearable. Whether it's Actors Equity or what is now SAG-AFTRA, was then Screen Actors Guild and American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So I was in 3 unions. And what they did for me was they made my working conditions safe, secure, and gave me a place to go if I had a problem. Mm-hmm. But the bigger thing they did is have health and retirement.
Oh.
So working non-union for me is, there were times when we were on strike and you'd see people going around, as scabs working. And actually one year we had a big strike and went on way too long. We should have, the union should have handled it better, Screen Actors Guild. But nevertheless, afterwards they went after people who came. We knew they were scabs and they came and applied to be Screen Actor Guild members, and a lot of people just wanted to make their lives hell, and we decided not to make their lives hell. But if we could prove that they had been scabs, we might say you cannot join for a year or 2 years or whatever, because they wanted all the benefits that we had worked for while they had gone around the back door. Yeah. But without those unions, I would have had to have been saving at a certain percentage of every job I did, which the money I received was not so great that I could put things away. But because the union was getting pre-tax dollars invested on my behalf, I have 3 pensions and retiree medical. Now, that may go away for the future young actors. They may not be able to afford retiree medical. I'm on Medicare as well. I know this is where you say you don't look it.
No, you don't look at
There you go.
No way.
Yeah.
You're...
Let's do that again. We'll do that again so you can all say it in unison.
Yeah.
I'm on Medicare.
What? No way. What?
I can't believe it.
Oh my.
I love good company work. I do it.
Yeah? How was that? How was that?
Snap. But I would be living on Social Security and Medicare if I didn't have unions, because my ability to have set aside that kind of money for myself would have been nigh on to impossible. And the other thing is, I don't think I would have had the discipline. I would have. It's not like I was living the life of Riley, but I how much more could I give up to do that? It would have been impossible.
Right.
Because my favorite phrase in the English language is pre-tax. I love that. So when you're young and you're not in that position of a union or something, then you have to sit and figure out with yourself or with a financial planner through your parents or something and say, what do I do? I wish I had put well, $5 would have seemed extraordinary because that would have been all the subway money I needed for the week or something. But if you even put $5 away every week or even once a month, and you put it in a place that you can't touch it, and that sits there for 30 years. The other great phrase in the English language is compound interest,
That's right.
Right.
And the thing with actors and musicians and singers and all of us who are starting out with this burning desire to do our art is we frequently ignore our life business, the things that we have to do to survive other than pay the immediate rent and pay the immediate food and say, well, I'm willing to give this, whatever this is, it doesn't matter whether cigarettes or alcohol or a trip home, I'm willing to give that up for my future in 30 years. That is so difficult. That's like saying to a toddler, trust me, your senior year in high school is going to be great. I mean, it's really the same thing. It's hard to imagine. You're not that, our fontanelles have barely closed by the time we're starting our careers. And now I'm asking you to think 30, 40 years down the road while you're going, I just want an ice cream. And you go, nah, I wouldn't have an ice cream. Why isn't that going in the savings? Well, that's a very hard thing to do. And so if you're not able to join a union or you're not in, I know some of you are teaching or might teach at a university and maybe they'll have a plan for you. If they have a matching grant, match whatever you do it. Right. Because if you think it's hard now, wait till you're 55, 65, 70. And we don't know the trajectory of our economy or our government for health care and everything. Oh, shut up. This thing keeps beeping.
It's telling you something,
No, it's just I don't know how to stop it announcing emails.
I'm thinking like, I have to think about what I'm going to do in the next 5 minutes. Versus, 30 years from now, I'm just,
Yes.
Well, if there's a way to sit and talk, listen, my parents were not great at all this. I didn't come from money. My parents never even owned a home. They always rented. There are 3 places that we lived in during my lifetime with them. So I wasn't going to get a lot of guidance there, although my mother once said a great thing. She said, I got a credit card when I finally qualified for a credit card. And she said, don't charge anything that you can't pay for in 48 hours. And I lived by that for many years. Well, I mean, it's a good principle, even though you're not really going to live by it. But if you buy something that you haven't got a chance in hell of putting that payment down at the end of the month, don't buy it. Because every dollar that you waste that way, and you go, well, I'll pay the minimum balance. I mean, except in extraordinary times. Things happen and you may have to pay the minimum balance or something. But then look at that interest rate. How expensive is this blouse going to end up being? If it's a $40 blouse to start with and I can't pay for it, it really doesn't look like a $200 blouse. And that's what it's going to end up costing me. So, at the end of the day, you have to, and I still am angry at public schools, and I think private schools don't do any better job, which is to teach people how to deal with their finances. And not to say when I've got my first big splurge of money, I did a pilot in California. This was in the it must have been the early 70s, I think. No, wait a minute. Mid-70s. Something like that. And I was with an agent I didn't trust and like much, but that's the agent I had. And they were throwing money at me. And I was committed down at Circle Repertory, so I just thought, I don't want to go to California and end up with a series or something. They'll chew me up and spit me out, and that'll be the end of that. So they offered me this pilot, and I'd say they offered me $7,500 for the week to do it, which was, you might as well have said $1 million to me. I was so frightened of going out there, I said, no.
Right.
And then they got it up to, I think I asked for 10, expecting them to say, because the agent's sitting there going, they're not going to agree to this. And I thought,
Right. Oh, that's helpful.
And I said, oh, and it's use me or lose me by let's say, April 15th.
Yep.
They're never going to agree to that. They agreed to it. I made $20,000 on this thing.
Oh,
Wow.
It didn't go. It didn't go to a series, which I was sorry about at the end of the day. I made some great friends through it, and it was the first time I had money. So I immediately called and booked a trip for my parents my mother had never been out of the country. I had sent them to London and to Italy because we had had exchange student who had turned into our brother. I was not living there at the time. My younger sisters were living there, but I knew Gabriele, and my parents had not been to Italy and met his parents, so they went there. Then they went up to Scotland, and so I'd never been in the position to do anything like that. So did I save the money? No, I didn't. I sent my parents to Europe because I went. Right. When am I going to ever do this again?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was worth it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
What?
But that was worth it for you.
Oh, it was way worth it for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then again, my union had taken the pre-tax dollars and put it over here.
Right.
So I saved without even saving.
Right.
Look at you go, multiple hands. So while you're in New York, do you have any? You were how long did you say? 25 years in New York.
I was about 20 years living in the city. Yeah.
20 years living in the city. You must have had some crazy travel story. What's a good story that sticks out to you staying in New York for that amount of time? I know you must have seen something, gone somewhere, met someone during your time there.
I love the smile.
I know, I love it.
Well, a couple of things are coming to mind. I remember getting into a cab once, and I never took cabs because they were too expensive. And I can't remember what the audition was or series of it. I had a terrible day. I mean, you just felt like everyone had dumped garbage on your head. And I got in the cab, and I don't know what else was going on that time. I know I lived off of Central Park West. Excuse me. And I got in a cab on 6th Avenue, and I gave him my address, West 73rd Street. And this was back when a lot of the cab drivers were older, Middle European men.
Right, okay.
And I guess I burst into tears or something. He said, well, what's wrong? I said, I've just had a horrible day. And he took the meter and he said, and he turns it off and he said, let's go through Central Park. So he drives me around. There are daffodils coming up, and we go by the merry-go-round, and we this and that and the other. He said, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it nice? And then we got to the end of it, he put it back on. And so I paid him, $1.95 or something, the cab ride. And
Oh my goodness.
and that act of kindness was so tremendous for me. I just, it was so sweet.
That's
so
beautiful.
sweet.
And clearly because you remember it so well.
Yeah. Well, it was just a terribly sweet thing to do, and it cost him money to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
I can remember a number of crazy people in the city that it was just, you'd say, oh, I'll meet you where the guy sings opera to another actor, because there was a guy on 52nd Street. He didn't look like a bum so much but he was crazy, and his hair was always plastered down. And he'd be saying, but he sang in different languages because he obviously had something to do with the opera in his life in some way.
Right.
But he was just insane. There was a guy who used to, what was it? Well, I was crossing the street one day, and this one woman looks at me and goes, "Whore! Whore!"
Oh, wow.
And come to find out, she's at that corner all the time,
Oh, good. Yeah.
And you're laughing, you're going, "Oh, I'm so far from a whore, you have no idea." And but you go, you could say, "I'll meet you where the guy sings opera." You could always go, "I'll meet you in the whore corner," because that was she was there. Yeah.
Wow. And Group 2 did some homework before we came, and we were watching. We got together one night. We were watching over at Eric's house, and Eric was very kind. He bought us pizza and
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. It's beautiful.
Wow.
So we're
Says love like Taco Bell.
I know.
Only the best from a
Only
boys.
the best.
here.
And so moral of the story is we were all together. We were doing some homework on Joyce, and Evan raised a great question. And we saw a TV show. We saw you in an episode of Law and Order, and then we saw a movie of yours. What is the difference between the two sets? Whether that's a TV show set or a movie set, is there a big difference in how they run, or maybe a time frame? Or it seems like the production value might have something to do with it.
I did very few film things, and that's, I think Marlon Brando once, I think he was the one who once famously said, "I'm not paid all this money to act, I'm paid to wait." If you're shooting a film, I mean, you can be in makeup at 4:00 in the morning and not see the soundstage until 9:00 at night, which is about the least amount of fun you can have.
What? That's crazy.
In television, for me, it was with Law and Order. You were called for about a week's time. I only had one. Okay. Early on, I did one or two a day job, but one day job. But mostly I did like a week. And so they're shooting they're shooting exteriors in one place, so you shoot that. It may not be in order, but it's but where you are and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But Law and Order goes pretty quickly because they always had a terrifically tight crew, and the directors knew what they wanted. They didn't do 45,000 takes. They're not going to do that. Yeah. And fortunately, when it started, I mean, it was a big boon for the New York actors, particularly character actors, because they wanted a lot of different types of people, and everybody didn't have to be a star. I mean, this was the genius of Dick. Who owns the series? Dick
Wolf.
Wolf, thank you. All I could think of was Worth. And
yes.
It's a friend of mine who's a writer. It has nothing to do with the show. Wolf was brilliant because he went to the place that had the most interesting actors of all types: black, white, young, old, tall, short, fat, thin, well-schooled in how to act. And they had interesting scripts. They knew they had good scripts. He got his core people together, and then he just started cycling us through there.
Right.
And it wasn't till much later that the stars started coming in. And when it's really turned more to stars, all of us who had been in really good roles were now shifting one down, which was a disappointment for some of us.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine.
they ran a tight ship. And you wait to get to what you're going to shoot because that's the nature of it. In theater, if you're rehearsing, you're still sitting there waiting for your scene. You just tend to all be together in the same room, watching each other work, which I find extremely important to watch other people work, which you can't do on a set. I mean, you can't wander in and kind of watch everybody else's work. There isn't that much room on a set.
Have you ever given anyone a note?
Sorry?
Have you ever given anyone a note? Just for them to take the note?
Oh, Jesus, no.
I remember reading that, I think, was it you who wrote that? It was giving a note, and you just take the note. You just take whatever you're given.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the director, yeah.
Right.
I'm not going to take a note from another actor. There's one director. There's one director.
Right.
Now, if you don't like the director, or you think his head is up his ass, or and I say he because 99% of the directors I worked with were men. It was very hard for women to get into these positions.
Right.
Yeah.
If you really think the guy is sloppy or even being stupid or lazy, a lot of lazy actors, and not so many actors, but lazy directors, where you just think, where's the work here? Then you take the note. And if you know that you want to do something else, you come in I would come in the next day, take a slightly different, or say, you were talking yesterday. You really sparked, I think you were right about this. I'd like to try it your way. And they will have forgotten what way that was. And you proceed, but you must do their direction full out for two reasons. One, I owe it to him to try what he's saying because there might be a kernel in there. And two, I can't try something else without trying his. Nobody's going to let you do that. Well, even if they don't know it, they're not going to let you do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Works the same way in the music world, like I was just saying, you do that with all your directors, all your orchestral
conductors.
Conductors. All that stuff.
And there's videos on YouTube, like Bernstein conducting the New York Phil. And
Yeah.
They'll stop and he'll say something to the principal trumpet, and he'll just nod his head and play it the same way, and then they'll say, "Oh, much better, much better." And they're just rolling their eyes back there. But I think it's part of being professional, just taking it. But sometimes they would fight back, and then in some orchestras, you're canned. You're gone.
You're
next day,
done.
so.
And you know what? And the wonderful dirty secret is, at least in acting, the director leaves you, and it's you in the play and the other actors. Now, it's a stage manager's job to keep it in the shape that was intended. But sometimes we all know that you find something more interesting, or the play also grows, it starts to breathe. Now, that doesn't mean that if I'm supposed to be standing over there, I can now be standing over here. Because, there's the orchestration of how things work. And what you forget is a director is looking at, from a musical standpoint, it's looking at the choreography and the themes he's setting. Who's close to whom? When does somebody, doing it my way, the actor's way, it doesn't always have the vision that's needed for the audience,
Yeah.
There was a play I did, it was the 5th of July, and it was a big success off Broadway. We weren't making much money, but we moved to Broadway.
Right.
And we were doing it there, and I was in rehearsal, and there was this character goes up and down these stairs a lot. She's always, I'm going to get my daughter, or I'm upset, and I go upstairs. And there was this one exit I had where it says, June goes upstairs. And I finally, I said, Marshall, I still, to this day, don't know why I'm going upstairs. And he said, I don't want 8 people on stage.
Okay.
I said, I can do that. And I'd come up the stairs every night. Susie Kurtz was playing the other role. And she was upstairs waiting to come on. And I'd come up every now and then and go, still don't know why I'm here. Don't know why I'm here. And we'd laugh about it. But I understood what he was saying. He didn't want all of us on for this scene. I had to exit, and he didn't want me to go outside. So, and could I make something up? Of course I could. I had something for every exit and entrance. I just didn't have it for that. And I finally gave up. I said, I'm going to do it because he needs me off stage. I couldn't come up with a reason. It didn't seem so fabricated that it was stretching credulity. So I just accepted it and went off stage. But it was one of those things where I just went, don't know why I'm leaving.
Not much you can, and we do that in music all the time. We have, one of the big things that we talk about is how to interpret the piece of paper that you're given with all the notes, all the symbols on it. There are so many different ways to interpret things, and it's like, okay, do you follow exactly what's there? Exactly, And it's helpful to have a composer in the room, if they're still alive. But if you have a piece of paper that says to do something a certain way without a composer there, there's room for that interpretation at least, right?
Yeah.
But there are some schools of thought that are like, hey, really, really on the paper, really on the paper, really on the paper. And there's a time and place for that. Have you ever been one to, add that own interpretation to your piece of paper with acting,
Do you mean change the words?
No, not necessarily change the words. Maybe change the inflection, for example.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's going to happen with time and tide. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I think first you have to, and this is probably true for you guys too, you have to know the score. You have to know verbatim what the script is. Now,
Absolutely.
you can have trouble, and Lanford would say every now and then, to be working on something, you'd go up at the same place in rehearsal, you'd go dry every time when you got to this, and I'd say, I don't know why I'm losing this. And Lanford or other playwrights would say, there has to be something wrong here. It has to be the syntax or the rhythm or something, because everything else and you don't know this. It's got to be. And sometimes it was just tweaking words a little bit, because somewhere in my brain it wasn't coming out. You have to develop the life of the person that could only say this in this moment. That's all they could say.
Right.
That's their answer. That's what they're going to say. So, but the longer if you have the luxury of a long run, for instance, which we did with 5th of July, then you can, when you first start out, you open a show, you're never ready to open a show, for God's sake. It's never long enough rehearsal. And I don't know what that breaking point would be, but it's usually not 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah. And you open, and when people say, I want to come to opening night, I go, oh, please don't. Trust me, wait a month. It will start to breathe and have a life, and will be settled and more comfortable. You'll actually see the play then.
Yeah.
However, and you're in a long run, and pretty soon you start to relax so that you're able to, instead of concentrating so hard, you start to live the life like a person lives that life. And so you can, just while someone else is talking, you look at another person, you're looking at, not to turn, you don't want it to steal the focus from the other character, but the way you do in life, he's nodding, he's, all that, you look around, and pretty soon you realize you have a life. And then you can take in things that you never saw in rehearsal. Never. Because now you're taking in everything. You're not in that laser thing about remembering your lines, remembering your intention, where are you going. You starts to breathe, and you'd be surprised how that changes without you doing anything. All you're doing is being.
Yeah. That's very relatable.
That's
too.
amazing.
But it just...
We're taking notes over here.
You're right. I never thought about that.
Start listening more.
Wow.
But I'm
And that-
I'm sure it happens with you guys. The more you play a piece together, I mean, you watch this with chamber groups. I'm always fascinated when I go to watch a chamber orchestra, and you're watching them. First of all, there's no conductor, so you're just communicating. And I watch your guys' eyes when you're watching each other and coming in and picking up rhythms and stuff. And actors do that all the time. And that's what's going to be coloring your music or coloring the work we do. Now, you can be in a show, so that is a wonderful story of a dear friend of mine, long gone now, Fred Reinglass, one of the great stage managers. He was doing, it was a show with Dick Cavett's wife, Carrie, I can't think of her name right now. I can't think of anybody's name right now. Anyway, she had an entrance. Huh?
We'll call her Carrie.
Yeah, I can't think of it. It'll come to me after this is all over. When I turn this thing off, it'll come to me.
Text me at 3 a.m. when it comes to you.
Yeah.
Anyway, she comes in, she takes these gloves off, throws them down, and says such and such and such and such, and goes to do something else. That was her entrance. And one day she came off and said to Fred, "I'm giving my notice." And he said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I just entered and took off gloves I wasn't wearing." That's when you got to go.
That's when you got to go.
But she stayed committed to it, so everybody thought she had gloves on. So,
Wow.
But she said, "I've been at this too long now. I just took off gloves I'm not wearing."
Wow.
So she had forgotten to put the gloves on, but she did take them off and throw them
That's
down.
right.
But
wow.
you can be in something where you go, "I have swept every corner. It's time for me to go."
Right. Was there ever a role that you... Was there like a favorite role that you had, or particularly memorable role that you've had?
I was very lucky. I had a lot of plays and roles that I liked. June Tally on the 5th of July was it was a great play with a great company, and I loved it. And then Lanford wrote a play where Bill Hurt and I were supposed to play our own parents. He came up one day in between acts, and he said, "How would you?" We were divided into smokers and non-smokers, not men and women. So Bill and I were in the same dressing room, and he knelt down between us, and he said, "How would the two of you like to play your parents?" And we went,
"Oh wow!"
I cannot imagine, because we knew their names were Olive and what was his father's name? Ken Tally and wasn't Tim? Oh, think of it. I can't think of his name.
Yeah. Again, another 3 a.m. thing, you can.
And we said, who might they be? I mean, we had our childlike creations of who they were and what they had done to us, but who are these people? Well, Bill was doing something else, so it ended up being, who took that role? Tim Shelton, I think. So I eventually played my own mother, which was very interesting for me.
That's
wow.
Yeah, that's kind of...
And then we took the show to California, and then a year later they wanted to redo it, but they didn't ask me to do my role, and I was terribly hurt. But the woman who played Aunt Lottie, which is a wonderful role, she became pregnant, and she was having a difficult pregnancy, and they said, "Would you come in and do Aunt Lottie?" And so I had another 48 hours to learn a play. That was, although I knew the
These
play,
48 hours.
I didn't know the character, but it was one of those things where you slip into a character and you go, "Oh my God, it was so easy. I put her it was like putting clothing on. She was totally
It was like a
different.
glove you weren't even
she
wearing.
was older. What, darling?
It was like a glove you weren't even wearing.
Like a glove I wasn't even wearing.
Yes.
Exactly. She was older. She was dying of cancer. She was a very interesting woman. And I loved playing that role. Loved playing that role. But then again, I love Jackie and Hot Hell Baltimore. I mean, I've been very lucky. I can't think of ever doing a role. I was in plays that you just went, could this please close?
Yeah.
I remember Fred came up. Fred came up once to call half hour for. It was a production of Lulu, Vaderkin's Lulu,
Right.
and it was not good. It was at Circle Rep. It was just not good. And it's not good when all the actors keep like putting on more makeup and trying to face up stage. Trying to. It's like performing like this. I'm not really here. But he came up to call half hour one day, and we all just started throwing dollars at him, going, "No, please don't make us go on."
Oh my god!
But they actually put up the closing notice, which we'd never had a closing notice go up because people were staying away in droves, and we walked in and we'd all just went, "Yes, it's closing, yay!" It was awful.
Time for it to end.
It was just.
Yeah.
I had next to nothing to do, but I was part of what filled the stage at that time. Oh my God!
Wow.
It was awful. Just awful. I was doing a show called Domestic Issues, which had a great poster.
Wow.
I wish I had the poster. It was a beautifully shot bowl of like fruit. Only it was fruit and a hand grenade.
Oh.
So my wonderful actor, again, I can't think of a name. I think, I have what I call reverse Sesame Street. I lose a letter a day. So anyway, I was in this wonderful company, great company of actors. But the show was just not hanging together, and we kept asking the artistic director to come in. We said, and they had a director, a woman. God bless her. She was like a poet or something. I don't know. She wasn't a director. And this is what she did. We'd rehearse, and she'd go, and then we'd finish the scene and go, "Help me,"
Yeah.
We knew it wasn't working. And she'd go, "Do it again."
Just buying a little more time.
Just a little
No
bit
direction
more.
whatsoever. And the artistic director came in, the woman who was serving as artistic director at the time, and said, "I think it's coming along really well." And we're going, we had like a private meeting with her and saying, Tanya, she's like, it's like someone who's painting the room a different color when what you need to do is get a new sofa. I said, "That doesn't change the sofa, And of course it was, so, what was I starting with this? So we're doing this play. Oh, here's hearkening back to "Does Anybody Ever Know You?" So the concept by the playwright was that as if they had lifted off the roof of the house, and you could see everyone in every room all the time, so that all of us were together doing things.
Yeah.
And I start the thing off. I'm playing a Jewish mother, and I start off by making like radish roses. I'm making a plate. I'm making a plate. So I'm making this stuff, and I'm carving all this crudité.
Right.
While other things are happening. Our son has come home. He's living with us again for a while. And I don't think he was married. I don't think he was married, but his partner or wife had been in the Weatherman kind of underground. And, bombing people and things,
Wow, yeah.
And so it was just one of those shows where you get through it.
Right.
Get through it.
Yeah.
And you need to do that sometimes, you just need to get through it.
You do.
To get to that other end, for the next thing.
Well, one of the ways we got through it, because we're a subscription house, we don't close. One of the crew members decided to start hiding a rubber chicken on the set. So you'd be, and the thing was, find the chicken. Where's the chicken today?
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's
So it'd be in a
great.
waste paper basket, and so I had this scene with the woman that either my daughter-in-law or the partner or whatever, and we're in this open kitchen, and here's the refrigerator, and the audience can't see the refrigerator. It was an real refrigerator. And I have to go and get something out of the refrigerator. We're having this rather active talk about, well, how do you do this? I mean, there are children and people, women, and you're blowing things up. And I open it up, and there's the rubber chicken. So I open it up, and Carolyn Cava, wonderful actress, she's in it. I open it up, and I just go,
Oh my!
now we can't look at each other. We've both seen the rubber chicken, so we can't look at each other. So we spend the rest of the scene talking like this. Because we know if we look at each other, we're going to be gales of laughter.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, the rubber chicken. It's all that got us through, really. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to start doing that.
Yeah,
We need to start doing that.
Find your rubber chicken.
Yeah, rubber chicken. Yeah.
Find
Well-
your own inner rubber chicken.
That's right.
Well, Joyce, thank you so much, for coming on and
Joyce,
agreeing to do this. I mean, this has been amazing. Just hearing
yeah,
all your
absolutely
stories and all your advice. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I had a lot of fun. I know everybody else
Oh,
did too. and
absolutely.
People are going to
It's a
take a lot
pleasure.
from this. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
You really made lemonade out of your lemons,
Well-
Joyce.
Well, I wish for you all long careers and tons of money, but what you'll probably have is you'll have a long career.
Thank you. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's there is a point at which being poor stops being fun. So
Right.
figure that out.
right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We'll
But
do it. Absolutely.
there ain't nothing like art. There ain't
Right.
nothing like
Yeah.
art.
That's a great closing. That's
Yeah.
right. There ain't
There you
nothing
go.
like art.
Ain't nothing
Well-
like art. I'm going to needlepoint that later today.
Perfect. Thank you again, Joyce. This was amazing talking to you on behalf of Group 2, on behalf of all our audience. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Get your mother to call me.
You know I will.
Okay.
All right, Joyce. Have a fantastic
Nice to meet you
day.
guys.
Yes, yes.
Thank you,
You're
everyone,
so
for tuning
cute.
in. We'll
Look
see
at
you
all
next
of
week.
What, darling?
And take care.
I will. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Um,